Hey everybody, this is Brian at OBEDIA, and today we're going to talk about carving a nice sounding kick drum out of an existing kick drum recording. A kick drum's not too hard to record. You place a mic in front of it and you start recording. There's not a whole lot of tricks to miking up a kick drum. In fact, the less tricks that you use, sometimes the better. However, it can take a little bit of tweaking in order to make a kick drum sound nice and tight. I'm a drummer, so I'm very picky about my kick drums. I like them to sound really punchy. You're going to have a different feeling on how you want things to sound when it comes to a kick drum and drum mixing, but these are just some tricks that I like to use when mixing a kick drum. So, I'm working in PreSonus's Studio One. You can work in really any audio workstation that you would like, and you'll probably be able to apply these same principles as well. So, here in Studio One, I have a kick drum that I've previously recorded. I'll play it back to you so you can hear it. Pretty basic. You can hear a little bit of bleed from other instruments there coming through. I'm not really worried about that. But I don't really think that it has enough punch. I want to give it some more punch. So I have an empty effect chain right here for my kick drum. And I'm going to start off with a little bit of compression. So I'm just going to drag a compressor in here. And the beauty of compression is that it'll allow you to bring up the volume of a recording, and it should allow you to do that typically without having your sound peak out depending on the settings that you make for your compressor. So typically when I'm working with a compressor for a kick drum, I like to use a ratio of about 4:1. This doesn't have to be an exact science, and you can play, of course, with the sound that you like the most. I'll go back and forth a little bit. In fact, I'm just going to go ahead and enter my numbers manually right here. And so I'm using a 4:1 ratio. This means that for every 4 decibels that I go above the threshold that I'm going to set, I'm going to reduce that incoming signal by 1 decibel. So this will give a little bit of punch to my overall sound of my kick drum. My threshold, I'm probably going to keep actually at about 15 decibels or so. You can experiment with this, but this means that as soon as the sound that I have recorded reaches 15 decibels, it is going to be fed into the compressor, and the compressor is going to do its job and bring that signal up based on my settings. Now, I don't mind leaving compressors in automatic mode, but in this case, I want to go ahead and give a little bit more gain to this kick drum, so I'm going to bring this up a little bit in the mix. So that I can give it, again, a little bit more punch. So this is just my overall output gain. I'll bring my input gain up maybe a little bit as well. I'm going to go ahead and bring my attack up real high. And, if I were to bring my attack down lower, I would be able to hear the kick drum a little bit before it's compressed. And I kind of want to just bring my attack up real high. You can experiment with this again as well. My release I'll bring up kind of high as well. This is really all that you will usually do on a compressor. You don't need to be too complex with your compression on a kick drum. You mostly want to add a little more punch to that kick drum using the compressor. So let's listen to this and see how we've hopefully improved it. Alright, so you can tell lots more punch already. Really sounding a lot better. So, in a lot of times I would actually be pretty happy with that. However, I want to carve this kick drum out a little bit more. I want it to have more punch. I know I keep saying that, but punch is a really nice thing to have on a kick drum. So I want to go ahead and make use of a little bit of equalization. So I'm going to drag a Pro EQ into my effect chain right here. So now equalization is where you can really spend a lot of time when you are working on a kick drum. A kick drum is by nature a lot of bass, and that's because that's what it is. It's a bass drum. But you don't always need to necessarily have a lot of bass with your equalization for your kick drum. In my case, this already sounds pretty bassy. So I don't need to kick the bass up too much. However, I might experiment with a little bit of rolling it off. Just a little bit. Now, what I also like to do here sometimes, however, is to bring things up in the overall mix around the 50 to 100 hertz range. This is usually the range, and below 50 even as well, that you're going to hear a kick drum and that it's going to be recorded. So I'll give it a little bit more bass because that will add to the punch that I am looking for. Now, I'm also going to go ahead and drop my mids out a little bit, just kind of following about after 200 hertz or so. I'm just going to start cutting some mids out because I really want to narrow in on this kick drum. Again, I'm working to carve it out of a mix. So after I've done that, I'm going to go ahead and look into the mid to high range. And again, you might find that this seems counterintuitive because you're working with a bass drum, right? So you would think you would only get bass. Well, the beauty of being able to carve out a bass drum is that if I start to bring my low mids up, I can really start to hear the definition of that kick drum. And when I say definition, I'm talking about the sound of the beater actually hitting on the drum skin and bringing out the sound of that kick drum. So I want to bring out the definition a little bit. So this looks kind of like a crazy roller coaster ride here, but I think that this is going to yield a good sound. And again, when you're mixing anything, you want to make some changes, listen, make some changes, listen. I'm just using some basic tricks right now that I have used on kick drums, namely rolling a little bit of the high end off because I don't want to have it sound too high or too tinny. And I'm giving myself a little bit of bass, not too much. I'm rolling off a little bit of bass below the 50 hertz range so that I don't get a too boomy kick drum. And then I'm making use of some mid-highs right here, which will allow me to actually bring out some definition in the kick drum. So I'm going to go ahead and just play this back. We're going to listen to this. We're going to see how we like it. So you can hear that that actually sounds really punchy. Let's play that again and disable the EQ. So again, this is the difference, as you can hear, between a very bassy kick drum and a kick drum that has a lot more definition overall. I've gotten more of that definition out by actually making use of the mid to high range right here in my EQ. And you can experiment with this and find a setting that you really like when it comes to using your equalization on your kick drum. But I personally really like to bring out the definition and carve that kick drum out by using some very careful equalization. And you'll also want to experiment perhaps a little bit with the Q settings on any of your filters in your EQ that you're using. The Q, very simply, is going to affect the overall width of your filter, which you're currently using in your EQ. You can see as I change my EQ right here, if I bring it up higher, I get this very, very tight space here between the two edges of my filter curve here in my EQ. As I bring it down a little bit, I can widen that curve. So this allows you to really narrow in on specific sounds that you might be looking to take out or amplify inside of a recorded signal. I'm leaving a fairly wide Q right now, and the reason for that is that if I start to bring this in very tight, I'm probably going to hear a little too much of the mid to high range. And actually, in this case, it actually sounds a little bit better if I kind of narrow in a little more and get a tighter filter curve going on. So this is one of these things that you're going to find that you need to just kind of experiment and find the sound that you like. But this is a great way to kind of carve a good sound out of a kick drum. And this is a trick that I like to use a lot to get a really powerful sounding kick. So I hope that this has been useful to you guys. Please feel free to get in touch with me with your questions. My email is brian@obedia.com. Get me on Twitter at twitter.com/obediatutor, Facebook, facebook.com/obediatutor. As always, keep on mixing, keep having fun, and I will see you guys in the next video. Thanks so much for watching. Take care.